It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, October 10th, 2023, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 284 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, it's been 3 weeks. I want to hear it all. I want to hear about your trip. I want to hear about life. What is new?
Not too frightfully much is new. Things are good. Life is good. As for the trip, it was a trip to North Carolina, visit some friends that we were actually roommates with, and we did this thing where some of the people got together to do basically like a writer's retreat at this lake house.
Nice.
My spouse worked it all up. It was fantastic. And in the meantime, I got to hang with another friend who, because his spouse was going on the writer's retreat, he was alone at home with the kids, and so I basically helped wrangle kids for the kid singular. For the weekend, and it was great fun. Nothing crazy or exciting happened. It was just all good times, you know.
Love it.
Good food, good friends, good hanging.
Love it.
That was the trip. Fantastic. Although, man, flying across country, getting home, it's a long trip, but well worth it. Let's see, what else interesting? My spouse DM'd a D&D game this weekend, which I'm so proud and excited.
Nice.
It turned out great, and that's kind of all my personal stuff that I think I want to share right now. Mr. Nice Guy, what about you? Anything cool happen or crazy happen?
Well, a little bit of both, man. So let's start with the positive. So my wife and I had to go to Sheboygan for a dental appointment that she had. I said, you know what? I'm going to go out. I'm going to hit these retro game stores. It's the second time that I've been up there, and Sheboygan is here in Wisconsin.
Sheboygan, of course, most famous for its weird name.
Right, exactly. And I'm trying to remember the name of the game store right now so I can give them a shout out. It's called Gaming Generations in Sheboygan. And every single time that I've been in there, absolutely excellent customer service, really cool people working in there. I think last time it was the owner, this time it was some employees. They both had like ROG Allies that they were setting up, ROG Allies, the new Steam Deck-like device. And they've kind of convinced me that it may be a better option than the Steam Deck. That's another story for another time. But I will say, I got a new pickup while I was up there. It was priced as it should be. I picked up Mega Man 3. Classic game. I believe it was $25, which is right where price charting has it. So shout out to them for having a really good selection of games and reasonably priced. They also had Mega Man 4 and Mega Man 6, I believe. And I was so tempted, but I was like, you know what? Hashtag baller on a budget. I got to be responsible. Mm-hmm. I can't just be buying all these games, right? I have too much stuff to play anyway. But yeah, the collector in me really likes that store. Now, Mac, on the sad note, on the frustrating note, we got a little bit of water in the basement last week, which is actually why we didn't do the pod. I love that you're trying to like act surprised.
Yeah.
Even though you totally know, because that's why we didn't record last week. So long story short, the water main in my backyard, or the knob in my backyard, has a pipe that runs through the basement. And we've had issues with it leaking before. And so we just don't turn it on. We thought it was fixed, but we really don't need to use water back there in the backyard anyway. One of my kids, who is 4, went back there and turned it on. And so my wife came downstairs and was like, "Oh no!" And I immediately knew like what had happened. And so we ran outside, turned off the water, and it wasn't, clearly I'm in the basement now, so it wasn't flooded so much that it ruined anything. No electrical issues, no drywall issues. It was easy enough for us to clean up. So I guess flooded is a strong word. but it definitely was not a night that I could record a pod. So luckily nothing was ruined, no damage, no issues, but just a big mess to clean up.
Well, I mean, Mr. Nice Guy, we can't end it on a low note like that. Maybe something exciting happened.
Did I mention that I got Mega Man 3, Mac? I got that. Oh, and one other thing happened. Why don't you tell the people what you're talking about?
Well, what I'm referring to is the Podcast Awards. The win for games and hobbies, our preferred category for the third year running. Nice Guy's got his 2021 trophy. I've got our 2022. And soon enough, we'll have a 2023 trophy to add to it. Cheers, man.
Cheers, buddy. We did it. Three-peated, man. And it feels so good.
Yeah.
You know, once could be a fluke, 2 times could be luck, but 3 times, that's legitimate. That's Kobe and Shaq level podcasting. And so I think that we should be in the record books for this. It's great. 2 more years, and then they named the award after us.
Yeah, here's to hoping. But anyway, a big shout out to anybody who's come here because of that, and anybody who participated in that process. Lots of fantastic choices in games and hobbies, and I'm positively thrilled that we're, so highly regarded. So thanks.
100%.
But yeah, that's been all the wild and craziness I can think of from the past couple of weeks.
Well then, Mac, on that note, I say we do what we do best, and we hop right up in that gaming news. Mac, what do you think about that?
Let's do it. What's going on in video gaming?
Oh, so much. And once again, this is episode 284 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Thank you so much for tuning in. 3-time award-winningest video game podcast, and we're so grateful for everyone who voted for us. Mac, let's start with the biggest story of the week, which is about the PlayStation 5. This is on GameInformer.com by Charles Hart. Nearly 3 years after the initial launch of the PlayStation 5, Sony has revealed a slimmer redesign. Both the disk drive model and the digital model will be updated, but these 2 models aren't as different as they used to be. You will now be able to purchase a disk drive separately, allowing you to upgrade a digital model to a disk-compatible version. Both versions will be available this November and will eventually replace the current model of the PS5 altogether. The new PS5 has been reduced in volume by about 30% and weight by 18% and 24% compared to previous models. The PlayStation blog post reads. It also says there's different textures and things like that. There's different things you can put on it, different covers. But Mac, here's the pricing. The slim PS5 with disk drive will still cost $499.99. The PS5 digital edition retails at $449.99, a $50 increase from the original digital edition. Now, the new disk drives, if you want to buy that separately, will cost you $79.99 in the US. And I believe one other change that's worth noting is that you'll now get like a terabyte of space in the disc version, which I think it was like 500 gigabytes before. Mid-console life refreshes. There's no increase in power. I mean, you're a hardware guy when it comes to PCs. What do you think about this mid-season refresh?
Well, I don't know where we landed, but Mr. Nice Guy, is it your perspective or your understanding that everybody who wants a PS5 has been able to get one by this point?
I believe absolutely that the scarcity of level of the original PS5 is no longer in existence. The chip shortage, not as relevant. Mm-hmm. They're on store shelves.
Excellent. Well then, I'm glad to hear that. But the thing that I feel is important, we are not that far removed from back when Xbox was just like, hey, if you don't have the equipment to be online always, then, then stick with Xbox 360. Yep. And then PlayStation did their very much, oh, here's how we share games. We're not too far removed from that whole back and forth. So when I think about a digital only console, I'm still a little bit concerned. But you know what? It has been the way that it has been going. And eventually we'll get there. But I am enthused by the fact that even though they're doing a slimmer and a digital thing, that an external drive will still allow you to use your physical discs without having to have that completely downloaded. I think it's a step in the right direction.
So here's an interesting thing about this, Mac. So, number one, earlier this year, they announced that they're coming out with the PlayStation Portal, which is going to cost $199.99, and it's going to allow you to play your PlayStation 5 remotely. Or rather, remotely, but within your own network, right? You got to be in the same house and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about this, and I don't think I've heard this take on any other gaming podcast that I listen to, but it's something I thought about, is to me that shows that the digital future is imminent. Because the reality is, Mac, if you're wanting to be able to play your PlayStation 5 in bed, upstairs, in a different room, in your basement, if your PS5 is upstairs, you're not going to want to have to go to your PlayStation 5 every single time and change the disc.
Mm-hmm.
The most convenient way to really take advantage of that technology is to be playing digital games. So that if I'm upstairs laying in bed, I can play Call of Duty, but then if I get bored of Call of Duty and I want to work on God of War Ragnarok, or I guess I could use a more recent example, if I want to work on Diablo 4, or Hogwarts Legacy, or one of the many great games that's come out this year, I can just switch without having to walk downstairs, I know first world problems, and change the disc. So I don't know. I think that we are moving more and more towards a digital future, even though I'm old school and like the physical stuff. I think that it's imminent, and I think that it's inevitable. Just a thought, man.
Yeah, no, and I think it is where we're going. I disagree with the general trend, but I mean, I'm not gonna stick my head in the sand and say that it's not happening or whatever. The decisions have been made and nobody's consulting me, and that's fine, he said, convincing no one. But, one of the things, and I'm just going to put this out there, one of the games that I was going to mention at the end of the show that I've been playing is I started playing that fighting game Legend of Korra once again. Came out in the early 2010s. It is not purchasable because of licensing things, and it stopped being purchasable just a couple of years after its launch. And it was never released physically. So the only option was you had to get in on the digital storefronts during the brief time that it was available. And so long as the data is still being served on a digital storefront, you can still play it so long as you already bought it and it's part of your account. But any issues whatsoever, and it's gone. And whenever a digital storefront decides not to host that data, then it disappears as well. And it's a fantastic game. I just feel very acutely the fragility of a digital-only future in that sense. So, I mean, head in the sand, I'm living in the past, all that being said, but that's my fears. And I do like that PlayStation's going to have an option. And Mr. Nice Guy, we had this thing back in the day called a CD changer. I'm sure we could rig something up for us in this day and age.
Like a 5-disc PS5 that just rotates through your disc. I had a 5-disc stereo at one point.
Yeah, we'd keep it in the trunk of the car, right?
Yeah, right? Exactly. Okay, that's not a bad idea. I'm actually kind of surprised thinking about it now that no game developer has ever thought of that. I'm sure the price would be astronomical. Especially when you consider that it's like Blu-rays now, right? So you need to have 5 Blu-ray lasers in there, and then it's just more prone to break. There's a lot of issues that could arise, but it's not a bad idea. The thing that frustrates me about this new PS5 Slim, as someone else said in the chat, is that there's literally no hardware upgrades other than the fact that there's going to be more storage space. It's going to be the exact same thing. It's just going to be smaller. And the other thing that frustrates me is I think that there may be a segment of the PlayStation population who went out and purchased a PS5 when they found out that the remote play device was going to be available. People who have money to do that may have said, hey, you know what? I think this is cool. I'm going to want to get that in November, so I'm going to go buy a PS5. Part of me wishes they would have announced this PS5 Slim at the same time as they announced the PlayStation Portal. I can see why they didn't do that. You don't want to overload people with info. But these I'll call it a mid-season refresh. It's really like a mid-generation refresh. I think that it's completely unnecessary. I'm curious if anyone in the chat is planning on upgrading their PlayStation 5 when it's only been 3 years. And we're not getting a pro version. We're just getting a slimmer version. So I'd be curious to hear from people in the chat. But Mac, that's all I have to say about that. Anything else on that topic, man?
Just that I will come kicking and screaming into the future, but under protest.
Fair enough. Appreciate all y'all's comments, and shout out to Kane for the tier 1 sub. We appreciate you and everyone who is here live. Mac, let's talk about Activision. You know, this Microsoft deal is getting pretty close to closing at this point. Now, regardless of how we feel about it, it does seem like it's going to happen, and we just got some interesting news on PCGamer.com, written by Joshua Wolins. Unless the FTC's LunaCon runs in at the last minute to physically tackle Bobby Kotick before he can sign anything, it's looking very likely that the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard will close in the very near future. I mean, very near. You understand, as in possibly this Friday, pending word from the UK market regulator. But if you think that heralds the imminent arrival of games like Modern Warfare 3 and Diablo 4 on Microsoft's Game Pass, Activision has news for you. It doesn't. Not this year, anyway. In a tweet from yesterday, Activision told fans to cool their jets when it comes to $17 a month access to its latest games, announcing that it does not have plans to put Modern Warfare 3 or Diablo 4 into Game Pass this year. Instead, Activision expects to start working with Xbox to bring our titles to more players around the world once the deal actually closes, meaning the corporation expects to begin adding games into Game Pass sometime in the course of the next year. Mac, I know you weren't a Game Pass subscriber, but to me, the whole point of Game Pass is that I'm getting access to the games that Microsoft calls exclusive from the companies they own. I'm expecting to get those as part of the service. Now, they've made it very clear that Modern Warfare 3 and Diablo 4, which is already out, are not going to be part of that service. Am I fair to feel cheated? Am I wrong to feel cheated? Or is it just the fact that the deal hasn't closed? Are they going to continue to be greedy, Mac? Or should I keep my hopes up?
Mr. Nice Guy, how could you? You will take what they give you. You will take what they deign to drop those crumbs from the table on you. And greedy? How dare you, sir? Never in the history of this country or of this world has I, for one, I think you're very justified in your things. What's the point of even this whole merger business if we're not going to have the advantage of having the games we want on more and different platforms? I mean, it's almost like there's not much in this merger to benefit us gamers, he said somewhat cheekily.
Well, you know what is interesting is the reality is I don't really play. So first of all, I resubscribed to Game Pass a couple weeks ago. And the reason I did it is because I wanted to play Starfield, right? Now, I could buy it for PC. I didn't want to buy it for PC. I just want to play it without having to tweak, without having to worry about hardware limitations, right? My PC was built 3 years ago. I don't have a 4090 graphics card. I have a great 2080 Super that works fantastically well, but it's not optimized for Starfield. So I said, you know what? I'm going to play it on my Xbox Series X via Game Pass. I feel like I get my money's worth, but I also feel like if they were putting Call of Duty and Diablo and all those games on there, I'd be getting it would be a dream. Like, I think that type of business model would sell Xboxes. And it'll be interesting to see once the deal closes how long they take to actually start putting those games on day one, like they've done with Halo, like they've done with Gears of War, like they've done with other exclusives that they've held for years rather than just the ones that they've just acquired. I'll be interested to see how they handle that. And I'm sure the people in the chat will too. Yeah. What did Galvatron say in the chat?
He says, Microsoft cannot automatically put Activision Blizzard's games on Game Pass. They made a lot of promises to the regulators, and it won't be a good look for them to do it right away. Microsoft will bide its time and do it when everyone has gotten bored and is no longer paying attention. And while I will say that is a fair thing to say, it certainly didn't stop them last time. We may or may not recall that in this very objection of the FTC over this merger in the first place, they pointed to, hey, look, Microsoft specifically said in their last merger they would not do X, Y, and Z, and then months after the merger was approved, they did exactly X, Y, and Z. I don't think they're nearly so concerned about optics. But when no one is paying attention is definitely a, moving target. I think you're right. Once people aren't paying attention, they make their moves. So, I'd say I both agree and disagree with the sentiment there. I don't think they're concerned about the looks so much.
Yeah, 100%. Well, cool. For the sake of time, that has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, now that we've seen what's going on around us right now, let's take a little look into the past. We call this video game history, of course, because that's what it is. Mr. Nice Guy, I've got a few things to bring up here, but I think I need to start with objectively the most important thing to happen these last couple of weeks and years before that came to us in 2003. Now, just, imagine with me, if you will, everybody, where you were in 2003. There was a problem. Many of us had cell phones. Many of us wanted to game, but gaming on cell phones hadn't really grown past Snake, really.
Right.
And that's why Nokia, they were plugged in. They knew what the people wanted, and so they provided us with the Nokia N-Gage, a beautiful synthesis of both gaming as well as cell phonery. Mr. Nice Guy, you strike me as a man who had a Nokia N-Gage.
I did not have a Nokia N-Gage, man. And
what?
I'm very familiar. Like, they had them in GameStop, which at the time, having a cell phone in GameStop was weird. I want to hear what you have to say about the Nokia N-Gage before I give you my opinion.
So I think it would be fair. Let me just ask you one question. Mr. Nice Guy, what do you think the biggest competitive gaming device against the Nokia N-Gage would have been?
Oh, probably at that point it would have been like the Nintendo DS or the PSP.
Ooh, I think you're a little bit too late. It was the Game Boy Advance, actually, that was the big competition.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the DS was out then. Pretty sure.
Game Boy Advance. Yep, 2003. You're right. Yep.
The Game Boy Advance outsold it 100 to 1. 100 to 1. It's not a surprise you and I didn't have a Nokia N-Gage. Not a lot of people bought them. It was running some Symbian OS. It had a mere 56 video games made for it. And it did not have the largest life cycle. And it was interesting because it's a testament to what happens when you try to do too many things, like setting up your controls well for being a gaming device does not wind up setting you up well for your, cell phonery, and vice versa. And that was some of the real big problems there, was just that, they tried to do too many things at once and didn't succeed at doing either of them especially well. The price point, the issues, is rightly pointed out in the chat that it was called the Gaming Taco. And it also had a downside where if you wanted to swap in new cartridges, because it did have cartridges, you would have to remove the back and I believe also remove the battery.
What?
To put in a cartridge and then put it back together. So certainly some design sensibilities that they struggled with. We can leave this discussion of a failed gaming device and move to something that is definitely well steeped in our gaming tradition. In 2011, Mr. Nice Guy, we saw the release of a little game called Crysis. Are you familiar?
Oh, of course. It used to be like the epitome of, can your PC run Crysis, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was like the baseline for if your computer was good. Very familiar with Crysis.
Oh, yeah. And shockingly, we were still asking, can it run Crysis? years and years later. It is kind of amusing that the first-person shooters wind up being the sort of, stereotypical benchmarks. Can it run Doom on the one side? And can it run Crysis on the other side? Because you'll see people with they'll get a kiosk from a closed down shopping center, and they'll hack it to run Doom for a laugh. All embedded stuff running Doom, all computers running Crysis. Now we've definitely moved on to other things, but for I'd say at least 8 years or so there, until about 2019, it was definitely, can you run Crysis was the question. I saved the best for last.
What's that?
Real talk. Released in 2007, Mr. Nice Guy, Orange Box.
Oh man, what a game, what a game.
What a set of games indeed. Team Fortress 2, Portal, Half-Life. Well, Half-Life 2.
Yeah.
But, you couldn't beat that. Incredible. Something for everything. If you like the shooters, you've got the shooters. If you like the competitive, you've got the competitive. If you're a puzzler, the puzzles. And I don't know about you, but the Orange Box is where Valve got put on the map for most of us.
Yeah, so it was for me, it was the first Valve game that I purchased. Because I've told the story before about how I got my Xbox 360, year my wife and I got married, 2010, Christmas. Orange Box, probably one of the first 10 games that I bought, and got so much time out of it. Like you said, if you felt like playing competitive, you could do that. But if you wanted to think and solve some puzzles, Portal was there for you. I don't know if I ever finished Half-Life 2 on the Orange Box, but it's amazing that it was on there. And I think that Orange Box was going for like $15 to $20. You really cannot beat that level of value in a package of games. Just phenomenal value.
Yeah.
Great game.
Absolutely fantastic. And, for me, the big game that I bought for Xbox 360 was definitely Left 4 Dead. But all that's a story for another time.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, that has been video game history. There have been many other exciting and interesting games that have come out, developments that have happened, but, just a few things to keep in mind. And if you've got a copy of Crysis, maybe fire that up this week in memory. If you've got an Nokia N-Gage, pull that out and make a couple phone calls. And if you've got that Team Fortress 2, put on a hat or two to commemorate gaming history.
Way to rhyme, Mac. Way to rhyme. Put on a hat or two. Team Fortress 2. Love it. It's interesting. We've come full circle from the N-Gage, and now we have an iPhone 15 that's touting that it can play AAA games. So we'll see how it does. The only difference is that you don't have to take it apart to play the games. You just download them. So we've come a long way. Well, cool. It is time for the topic of the week, a segment where we talk about something relevant in gaming and give our opinions on it. Now, as you know, if you're a longtime listener, we often do Indie Game of the Week, but we can only play so many games so quickly. So we want to give all the games that we've gotten their due diligence. We're going to skip that this week and talk about a topic. Mac, we're going to talk about Super Mario Wonder, which is going to be the new Mario side-scroller for the Nintendo Switch. Now, you and I both have grown up playing Mario games. We're well-versed in the side-scrolling Mario. And I was reading an article today. I wish I could find it. I'm just going to summarize. It talked about how 1985 Mario 1 was so revolutionary because it was steeped in mystery. There were pipes that looked like they were just part of the environment, but you could actually go down them. There were hidden warp zones. You got a mushroom, and for some reason it made you big. There's turtles walking around that are the same size as you are. It was such a revolutionary game, and to this day, I can pop in Mario 1, Mario 3, Mario World, Mario 2, and still have fun. Mac, I'm of the opinion that Mario has gotten a little bit stale, at least in the side-scrolling variety. I don't know if you've played any of the new Super Mario Bros. Games going back to the Nintendo DS or the Wii or anything like that. They just don't do it for me anymore. I want something that brings back that feeling that I had when I used to play Mario on the NES, SNES, even on the N64 when we got our first 3D iteration. So the tough question I have for you today, and that I have for our audience here live and after the fact, tweet at us or email us. What do we got to do? What does Nintendo have to do to make side-scrolling Mario fresh again? Hashtag make Mario fresh again. Because I've gotten a little bit bored of it. I don't even get that excited when I see a new Mario side-scroll.
Dude, it's a big question. Deserves a good answer. I don't know if I've got one. But I can tell you what I do remember and like.
Yeah.
Some of it is mystery, right? And some of that mystery is inherently going to be blocked by the fact that we have such access to information.
Yes.
It's hard to keep certain things under wraps. And that will continue to be the case going forward. There are certain places I don't go when a new episode or a new season of something drops, just so that I don't wind up running into spoilers. And to some extent for games, you kind of have to be that way a little bit as well. But I think what I really appreciated about early Mario games is that I felt when I got it wrong that it was my fault and not the game's fault, if that makes sense.
It does.
While the last game that I've played in the Super Mario, ambit was, I want to say Bowser's Revenge or something on the Switch.
Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury.
Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury. That's the one. I played that one on the Switch, and I felt for the most part like they did a pretty good job. Now, it was definitely a 3D Mario, not a side-scroller. What I'm saying is I feel like they can probably do it. I think they can make a side-scrolling Mario that brings those feelings because they've done a pretty darn good job in the 3D sphere. I feel like they can probably do it for the 2D. But then again, Mr. Nice Guy, I'm missing all of the experience of the games that make you skeptical of that. So take what I say about this with a grain of salt.
Well, you bring up some valid points. And I think the biggest point you bring up is that back in the day, we just had to figure stuff out. And that was part of what made these games special, is that as a, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, it was super hard to get through Super Mario Brothers 1. One, because I didn't have access to the internet. And two, because my gaming ability was not what it is today. I'll never be able to go back to being that 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 6-year-old kid who was playing video games for the first time and learning and being like, oh, Mario 1 is hard. Now I could go through and I could beat Mario 1 in 10 minutes using warp zones, right? So that's never going to be the same. I think that one thing that Nintendo has done a very good job of is when they came out with Super Mario Maker and Mario Maker 2. Because as a gamer who was born in the 80s, I've always felt like we were cheated out of a true Super Mario Brothers 4. Right? We went Mario 1, 2, 3, and then later we got New Super Mario Brothers as a side-scroller. Mario 3, being the best Mario game of all time, is one of the video game hills that I am willing to die on. And I would have loved for Nintendo to come out with another game in that same style, with the number of secrets that are available, with the ability to fly, with the ability to fall behind blocks, the ability to do all that cool stuff. That was such a huge jump from Mario 2 to Mario 3 that made me fall in love with Mario 3. I don't think we've seen a jump that big other than maybe going from Mario 3 to Mario 64, and that's only because they added another dimension. To me, all of these Mario games, they add new power-ups, they add new colors, they make it co-op, you can play with your friends at the same time, but they haven't made a jump as big that's been impressive to me. And I really hope that they can do it with this game. Now, Spennis in the chat said that he thinks this game is going to be a gem. And Spennis, as we know, is a huge Nintendo fan. Mac, I'm going to read his reasons why and see if you agree, if we agree. He says, I think that it is an interesting element of throwback nostalgia with a great sense of party environment, of couch co-op as well. Probably more for great platforming gamers or just old heads like us. It was fun playing New Super Mario Bros. Wii with the chaos of cooperative platforming and the dealing with the energy of why did everyone bubble, meaning they died and they came back in a bubble, and moments of laughing and chaos. Mac, what do you think about co-op? Do you think that co-op is a huge jump in terms of Mario? Because we didn't used to have that. We have it now.
You know, I don't know how much of a big jump it was. I know that it certainly did feel different in playing, Super Mario Brothers Wii, and something that I actually kind of enjoyed. But at the same time, I have fond memories of, well, let's face it, my older sister was the better one at Mario, so I was the one holding the second player that wasn't even connected to the console to feel involved. But still, it is interesting to actually have somebody else in it with you. I had a thought, and it's probably a bad thought, but I'm gonna voice it anyway. But I think it's objectively true that Christmas is more fun when you're a child and you're the one getting the presents.
Sure.
Is it possible that to some extent the side-scrollers could be the type of thing that was, that we're just too old to really appreciate a good side-scroller because we're jaded and we feel like we've seen it all?
No, and I'll tell you why that's not the case. Because I loved Celeste. I loved Hollow Knight.
Okay.
Like, there are some really, and I know that you did too. So, I mean, there's some really good side-scrollers out there. It's just that, to me, Mario has not evolved enough to keep the side-scrolling fresh. That's just my opinion. And so I get bored of it. And I think, okay, there's never going to be another moment like when I was a kid and someone showed me, or I realized that when you're going up the steps to the castle and there's a turtle walking down them, you can jump on the turtle's head. And if you time it just right, you can get infinite lives. Like, that was such a great moment in gaming.
Yeah.
And we just don't get that anymore. So,
man, I don't know what the answer is, but Mr. Nice Guy, I have to believe that that we just don't know what we don't know yet.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be there, and we're going to be looking back on this like, oh my gosh, Super Mario Brother Wonder really did bring the wonder and excitement.
Fingers crossed.
I'll fly out there. We'll do some couch co-op.
Let us know what you think October 20th. That has been the topic of the week.
Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I have posted a link in the chat to this project. Feel free to pull it up. And we're going to talk about some of the virtues and vices and whether or not we think it should be kicked out of here or kick-started. So this is Cataclysmo. It is a real-time strategy game. But it also has a sort of, shall we say, tower defense type builder aspect to it. So the important things to note is that it's being done by the same group, Digital Sun Studio. You may remember them from games such as Moonlighter, which they kickstarted several years back.
Yep.
And they also released another game that was not kickstarted. It was just done through the normal, whatever that means, if you will, channels, called Mage Seeker. I don't know much about that game other than it is a thing, and it seemed to be pretty well received thus far. Anyway, this studio headquartered in Spain, and this construction/tower defense game is going to go for $29 to $31 for the minimum buy-in, whether you get there in time for the early birds. And they're looking for $52,000 to fully fund it. They've got 20 days left to go, and they're about 40% of the way funded currently. And they are expecting to deliver May of this upcoming year, so not that far out. It's only about 7 months out, so not too shabby at all. But the particularly interesting thing about this is that the building aspect of this is a little less, build this one sort of, thing here, build this sawmill, even though there are sawmills to harvest the, wood and build things. But there's also the building of individual wall pieces, building structures, staircases, constructing your keep. And then the baddies come at night, just in a sort of tower defense style.
Yep.
But a real-time build and tower defense with some real-time strategy, because you do have a few units. They do show in sort of the opening there a couple of units that you get pretty quick there off the bat for use, with their own sort of, this one works much better if it's posted high, this one works much better if it's posted low, and and so on. It has some surprising depth given the types of genres that it's kind of pushing together. And while it isn't a full blend of something like an RTS and a tower defense, it incorporates enough aspects of both that it really feels like it's verging on a new subgenre. Which we don't see, which sometimes we see experimentation in, new subgenres, but this one certainly feels different, and different in a good way. Anyway, Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts on this?
So first of all, great analysis. I like what you said about it bringing a new subgenre to light, because so often when we see new subgenres, it's stuff that requires you're playing online with other people. Mm-hmm. Battle Royale, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Fortnite came out, and PUBG and Apex Legends, and everyone said, it's a new subgenre, and Call of Duty Warzone. And it is a new subgenre, but ultimately you're running around killing people, right? It's multiplayer. And so this game has made it very clear that it is a single-player game. In fact, it says down here that there's going to be a 30-hour single-player campaign, which, by the way, is an excellent way to advertise your game, because we always see these types of Kickstarters and we're like, okay, but how long is this going to be? How much replayability am I going to get out of it? So props to them for making that very, very clear from the get-go. We don't see that enough. I will never kick a game just because the genre is not for me, and I don't believe that this genre is for me. But Moonlighter, fantastic game. I believe that this game is going to find its audience, and that it's going to be polished, very well made, and delivered on time, just based on the track record of Digital Sun Games, the team that is making this. I have no complaints about this. There's 30 days to go. They're well on their way. And it doesn't seem like they are... It doesn't seem like a money grab, if that makes sense. Sometimes, Mac, I get frustrated, and I know you have said this before as well, when someone already has tons and tons of money and tons of success, and then they still kickstart their next game. We're kind of like, what are you doing? Moonlighter was a success, but it was not a broad success, to the point that I feel bad about these people putting another game on here. I'm excited to see what happens with this. Yeah,
to that point, I sometimes wonder, how I feel about a large company kickstarting. You've referenced it yourself there. I feel like this company, Digital Sun is just right on the cusp of where I feel is appropriate. You're still small enough that Kickstarter is a venue that I think you should be in. I hate to be the gatekeeper of Kickstarters, but that's just my feeling. But Mr. Nice Guy, all feelings aside, I have a pretty solid rule about, not just telling me you can do a game, but showing us you've got it, what it takes. And that means bringing a playable demo, and I am happy to report that Cataclysmo does have a playable demo.
Of course they do.
As a part of this. They do. Now, I am a little sad that it comes almost at the very bottom of the campaign information, but it is there. You can pop it on Steam. I tried it out on my Steam Deck, and while I didn't get as much time as I would have liked to get it rocking and rolling, I loved the amount that I played. It had a style, the movement and attacking style was a lot more similar to what I would expect from, say, something from Warcraft 2 or Age of Empires in the initial bit. And then when I finally made it to the keep to start building, constructing, and getting that tower defense aspect, I had to stop because I had to go places. But I'm excited to pick it back up a little bit. Tentatively, I'm saying I think this is going to be fantastic. And I know where I fall on this. My vote is for kick-starting.
Yeah, now remind me, what was the price point of this? I guess I can just scroll and find that. It was $20,
It
right?
is higher than I would like. If you get in on the early bird, it's $29.
$29, okay.
And if you don't get in on the early bird, it's $31. So it is higher than I would like to see on a Kickstarter project. But I think they've won me over with their demo.
Yeah, so I mean, you're paying $1 per hour if you play the campaign once, and I don't think that is unreasonable. Think about how many $60 games have a 20 or 25 hour campaign. We see that quite a bit.
Think about how many times you blast through a game in just the amount of hours. I mean, I don't know about you, but in a strategy, real-time, or tower defense game, I usually have to replay levels several times before I get it right. I'm not good at it by any stretch, but I like them.
Well, I say kickstart as well. I hope that they succeed.
Excellent. Well, we wish everybody the best. Obviously, Digital Sun Studios and Cataclysmo as well. We'll keep our eyes open, but consider trying out that demo and kickstarting it if you think it's for you.
Fantastic. And now it's time for Nerd Flex. A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts, and you do sometimes, and other times you do not. If you're here live, you know what to do. Get your multiple choice gaming related questions in the chat. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to get the answers correct. No Google, no phone a friend, none of that. We just answer questions with our gaming knowledge and logic and reasoning. Mac, we already have our first question in the chat. Would you do the honors?
All right. The question from Spennis the Menace, our resident Pokemaster, says, in Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, the one-hit KO moves and their accuracy beyond the 30% base was affected by what attribute? Was it defense, special, level, speed, or attack? And I'm going to feel really, really bad if we get this wrong, because I should know it, but I'm waffling between two options at the moment, and I'm not sure which is correct.
What are you thinking?
I'm wobbling between special and attack. I'm leaning more towards special, but yeah, I can't be sure.
So I was going to say we could obviously eliminate defense. That's just obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing about level that's interesting is I'd almost feel like in order to have a one-hit KO move, you'd need to be a high level. So that, to me, could be an option. I don't think that speed is the option. I would lean towards... And I also think that attack is almost too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So, my mind says it's going to be level or special, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know for sure either, but we both have overlap on the special answer. So should we go for that?
Let's go with special, and I'm sure it'll be attack, but let's go with special. Final answer.
Though this got corrected just a simple generation later, moving the accuracy basis to level and the inability to hit to a higher level Pokemon, the one-hit KO moves in Red, Blue, and Yellow were determined by speed.
Interesting. Dude, I learned something new today.
We missed that. I feel bad about it. We have another question from A.R. Wilson, which comes to us with... What am I saying? Our question from A.R. Mr. Nice Guy, I don't know why I'm tongue-tied. Will you read it?
He says, and it's not multiple choice, but that's okay. He says, what year did Midway, unfortunately, file for bankruptcy? What year did Midway file for bankruptcy? Now, he didn't give us options, so it could be any year in history. But we could talk about this logically. Midway, I know them most for their arcade games, Mac. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Now, I'm trying to think of some of the games made by Midway. Pretty sure that Blitz 99, Blitz 2000, 2001 were all Midway games. And I don't know beyond that. So I'm thinking it's probably early 2000s to mid 2000s that they filed for bankruptcy. I could be totally off.
I 100% agree with you about end of the late 2000s, specifically because of something else that I did some research on. 2009, if memory serves right.
Not 2008. Okay.
Okay, 2008, 2009. Because well, it's going to become apparent when we talk about legalese, actually, because it is the subject of today's legalese.
There's fiscal years, too. So I don't think it's wrong to say 2008, 2009, because you got fiscal years, right? So why don't we put that for our answer, 2008, 2009, because that's what I would have guessed as well, 2008. A.R. Wilson, let us know in the chat, please, if that is correct. Dude!
2009. So for reasons that will become apparent very soon, A.R. Wilson, we were just operating on similar wavelengths.
I gotta look up Midway games, just because I feel like I should know way more Midway games. Mortal Kombat, Midway Arcade, Hydro Thunder. There's a bunch.
So the reason I know is because there was some to do when Midway Games' intellectual property was purchased by Warner Brothers in 2009. That was where I was wobbling, because it was just like, well, if the purchase happens in 2009, did they declare bankruptcy in 2008? You know how paperwork works.
We're gaming geniuses. For those of y'all listening, if you're not here live, we don't fake this stuff. We talk through it and we figure it out, even without multiple choices. That's how we do.
Is indeed.
That's why we're 3-time award-winning podcast, boy.
Cheers.
All right. We got no more questions in the chat, but we do have questions in the test bank. And so, Mac, last question of the day. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog question. On what system did Sonic Chaos originally appear? On what system did Sonic Chaos originally appear?
Sega Game Gear? Total guess.
I was leaning towards like Sega Saturn. We can go different directions because this is not multiple choice.
Let's do it. It's not multiple choice. We can go our separate ways.
All right, I say Saturn. You say Game Gear. It was the Master System.
Master System curses.
Well, we went 1 for 3. We did not get clean swept, and that has been Nerdflex.
All right, well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast, and what we're talking about today is an interesting bit in history called Threshold v. Warner Brothers. Now, Mr. Nice Guy, you remember, I'm sure, with fondness, the Mortal Kombat movie released in 1995, yeah?
What a movie, what a movie. Of course I remember it.
All right. I'm sure you also remember, perhaps with slightly less fondness, the Mortal Kombat movie done in 1997, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, yeah?
I honestly don't remember that one. I'm not going to lie.
Oh,
I don't think
did
I
you
saw
not
that
watch
one.
that in the theaters?
No, I never watched that one, no.
Oh. It was not as good as the first one. Among other things, they swapped out Raiden for a different actor, and, there was all sorts of stuff. But you probably, especially then, won't remember the third Mortal Kombat movie, right?
I do not.
That's because it never got made. But Threshold Entertainment, in conjunction with New Line Cinema, made the first 2 Mortal Kombat movies. But the third one was definitely in the works. How do we know this? Well, there is, of course, always the hubbub, but because of this Threshold v. Warner Brothers, the dude who made those movies, executive producer and everything, dude's name was Kasanoff, right?
Okay.
And so when Midway goes bust in 2008, they were essentially sitting on this third Mortal Kombat movie which obviously the actors who played the first, Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, those first two movies, they were originally signed on to do 3, but because of the bad performance of Annihilation of the second movie and such, it just kind of, the third one just gets kind of caught in development. So when Midway goes bankrupt at the end of the aughts in 2009, as we learned, Warner Brothers buys the assets, and this guy Kasanoff gets frustrated because he's like, "Hey, look, guys, I had a contract with Midway that I was going to be the man in charge of these Mortal Kombat movies, and now that Warner Brothers has bought this stuff, they're obligated to that, and Warner Brothers is totally trying to make a third Mortal Kombat film, and they're trying to cut me out." And so there was a lawsuit, there was a back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, I am being damaged. I need and deserve not just the money, but the law has to stop these guys from making a Mortal Kombat film without me." Now, at the end of the day, when all the dust settles, he gets, I think, $14,000 or something for some money that he was entitled to, but that got lost in the shuffle at some point in time or whatever. But the judge finds in a bench trial. Bench trials, you don't get a jury. It's just the judge's consideration. That can be for a number of reasons. Could be because, like recent news, you don't check a box to ask for a jury trial because you're not reading your paperwork clearly. High profile one of those recently.
Sure.
But also it can be because it's just not a matter for fact finding because the facts are not in dispute. Either way, just the bench trial, it gets that. And but he really has no case, and and that's where this story ends. Or does it? Because in 2021, there was a new Mortal Kombat film, and who winds up being an executive producer on that very film? Mr. Kasanoff. So we, like so many things, come full circle. Somehow, he got to be a part of the third movie that was almost certainly nothing like the one he was planning on, but, executive produce is executive produce. And, well, that's just a little bit of legalese for you.
Dude, that's such an interesting concept. Because what if someone said, "Hey, I'm supposed to be in 3 movies. I've only done 2. You promised me 3." And then they just said, "Oh, well, you're going to be in the next one. Not the one we're making now, but we'll make sure we put you in one down the road when we make it," right?
And consider the huge time frame, 1995 to 1997 to 2021.
Exactly.
That huge gap.
It's almost like you could filibuster someone and just be like, "Nah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Just be patient. It's going to happen."
Yeah.
And then just wait until they are not alive anymore.
It's so wild that I researched this, and A.R. Wilson asks about Midway, because part of the case is the Midway bankruptcy. So thank you. That's crazy.
Video Game Stars Aligned today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 284. Before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool, nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms, because we're platform and console agnostic. Mac, what have you... Oh, by the way, if you're here live, you have a job to do. Let us know what you've been watching and playing. Mac, what have you been into?
So I've been... I watched the Batman movie, the one with Robert Pattinson.
What'd you think?
It was way too long. It was okay, but just it had no business being that long. You needed to trim that fat, and there were some cool moments about it, and I was impressed by some of the performances, but they really needed to focus up. Watching some Dimension 20 and the newest season of Taskmaster. It's a British game show that's just comedians doing these wild and crazy tasks. It can be quite fun. As for playing, I've been playing some more Dust and Neon, also The Messenger. I've got one last achievement on Messenger, and I don't know if I'm going to successfully get it because it's pretty rough.
It's a great game.
Cataclysmo, of course, and Legend of Korra. That's been me. Oh, and of course, I've been playing some Dungeons & Dragons lately, and some GURPS, which has been just always my jam. How about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
Dude, I have been playing a good amount of retro stuff. Because lately, I've only had time to get short spurts of gaming in, so I haven't been able to touch Starfield, haven't been able to work on Tears of the Kingdom. But I went through and I looked up top Game Boy games of all time, hidden gems, and some of the games that I found were Quarth, which is an interesting puzzle game, Trip World, which is an international release, and Adventures of Star Saver. Now, when I was looking at retro games up in Sheboygan, this is one that I saw in person, and it was priced at like $35, which is kind of pricey for a Game Boy game, original Game Boy. So it made me go home and look it up, see what it's all about, and it's a great game. As far as like more modern stuff, the only thing I've really gotten to dive into is some of the Steam Next Fest demos that are out there. So if you're listening and you like Steam, you have a Steam Deck or you have a PC, check out some of these demos. I did download Kid Bubblegum, Goliath Depot, and those are the only two I've played so far. They were both okay. Looking to find some of the best ones out there. Wait, I forgot to mention, I finally got to watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Finally got around to it. I thought it was great. That's all I got. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 284 of Two Nerds in a Pod. We're super grateful that we were able to become a 3-time winner of the Games and Hobbies category at the Podcast Awards. We could not do it without viewers like you and those who support us in many different ways. Mac, anything you want to say to the people before we go?
Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next time.
Be kind. Video games are art. Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.